Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural CHRIS HOLA 6x8 Recovery Top of Mind webcast series. I'm Jeff Higley, president of the BHN Group, which oversees hotel investment conferences around the world. It's been a unique and scary time for all of us because of this global pandemic. And as COVID-19 continues to broaden its reach throughout the Caribbean and Latin America regions, the hotel investment community continues to search for answers as it faces a bumpy road ahead. These answers come as things seem to change by the hour and by the day. So I do want to say a quick plug. Please keep in mind that we do have, we are still planning for our CHRIS and HOLA events in September in Hollywood, Florida at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, the Caribbean Hotel and Resort Investment Summit, and Hotel Opportunities Latin America events. We're prepared to adjust them as needed based on how everything transpires with the recovery and the pandemic. So if the situation allows it and we can abide by all social distancing and government guidelines, we plan to bring the hotel conference, hotel industry together in some fashion to network, conduct business, and discuss the road to recovery for the Caribbean and Latin America. So today's webcast is CHRIS HOLA 6x8 Recovery Top of Mind and features 6 of the top minds in the hotel industry from the regions. While the focus is on the Caribbean and Latin America, the discussions will undoubtedly touch on topics that affect hoteliers worldwide. The webcast includes 6 separate 8-minute segments and talking about what's on the top of mind. We have Zozaya from Apple Leisure Group, David Kong from Best Western, Isabel de Caires of CIBC FirstCaribbean, John McCarthy of Leisure Partners, Raul Calvet from Calvet and Associates, and Ricardo from JLL. It'll be fast-paced and the time will go quickly. We'll be adhering pretty strictly to the 8-minute limits, and the speakers have all been forewarned to be succinct, direct, and impactful. So there won't be any time for any questions, unfortunately, today, but please enjoy the program. So leading us off first is, I'm gonna stop sharing there, and leading us off first is Zozaya. As executive chairman of Apple Leisure Group, Alex has more than 30 years of industry insight to lead the company's 14 travel and hospitality brands. In normal years, ALG delivers more than 3.2 million leisure travelers annually to Mexico and the Caribbean. Alex, welcome. Thank you for being part of the program today.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
It's obviously not a normal year. So what's on the top of your mind today as you navigate the pandemic landscape?
Yeah, you're not kidding. It's not a normal year, particularly for tourism, but overall for the whole world. Well, of course, what is on my mind and it's on my body and it's on all around me, on my actions and on my time, of course, is the recovery. The recovery from this. I'm not talking about going back to normal. I'm just talking about recovery and how long it's going to take and how we're going to get there and try to do it in the fastest time as possible. So, of course, what is first on my mind are the casualties in terms of not just lives, but in terms of jobs. In tourism, internationally, we have lost more than 100 million jobs and about 3 trillion tourism GDP. And that will continue if we don't start to recover fast to a lot worse scenario. So obviously, that's what concerns me the most. But then how can we start the recovery as fast as possible?
So when you're talking about the jobs, in particular in these regions in Latin America and the Caribbean, specifically the Caribbean, where the employee pool is relatively tight to begin with, how do you transfer that? How do you incorporate finding employees, dealing with the employees that you have to furlough or lay off in these times, bringing them back, and still dealing with a very tight labor pool?
You know, it really changes so much from place to place, from island to island, and from country to country. It's amazing how much inconsistency there is. And I'm not saying in terms of domestic policies, the whole world should be the same. Of course, we have some colonies or former colonies of European countries that had a completely different approach, even within the same island, a different approach towards the labor force in terms of helping or any type of benefits or incentives to the industry that obviously end up helping everybody who works in the industry, particularly direct employees. But so there is nothing that we can apply to all of them. There's no direct formula other than we all want to come back as quickly as possible. We want to keep our people on the labor force, not only because that's a human thing to do, but also because it's good business. I mean, our product is the people, and it's delivered by the people, and it costs us a lot of time and money to bring our staff to the point that they are now, and trying to go back and start new, rehiring them, retraining them, and all that will be very costly. So it makes sense also from the business standpoint to retain the employees and try to come back as quick as possible using as much labor as we can. But of course, it really varies place by place.
Alex, how many of your properties have stayed open? Are most of them closed? What's the lineup look like there?
0 stayed open. We close to 80 properties, close to 30,000 rooms. We all close, even the ones in Europe. We have about 20 hotels in Spain, in the Canary Islands and the Balearic Islands, and they all closed. Unfortunately, we had to shut down every single one. They're all leisure, they're all resorts on the beach. And so all the emerging market, all of the markets, the gateway markets were shut down. So obviously they had no point to close. And it's costing us money to keep them closed. The key is how can we reopen and lose less money when we reopen than the amount of money we're losing when the hotels are closed.
Have you, obviously you've started trying to figure out how to reopen in an orderly fashion and do the training that you're talking about, making sure everything is, clean and healthy and ready for guests. Is there a process? How long would that process take based on what research you've done so far in terms of reopening?
It's almost like a new opening of a hotel. Number one, it costs money because you need a working capital in order to reopen the hotel. You have to start retraining, particularly on the new protocols, the protocols that hopefully we're going to be able to speak a common language among the whole region, hopefully the whole world, so the consumer knows what to expect when they come to a destination, when they start to travel again. I think uncertainty and confusion is what is killing the industry at this moment, inconsistencies. But anyway, so retraining the people with the protocols, and are costly also. That's most of the training, but it is like opening a hotel. You need to restart with the marketing and promotion. Of course, you need to restart with the training, and it really varies from place to place. But I think we have in every single hotel, we still have labor staying there, actually living at the hotel. And we will start adding within 3 or 4 weeks before we open, start adding staff, of course, to be ready to handle the hotels with very low occupancy levels, unfortunately. But it takes at least 3 to 4 weeks in order to bring people to pace, just to take the minimum amount of labor force that we need in order to provide a good experience.
And of course, the vast majority of your properties are all-inclusive models. So how is that reflected in this kind of environment, different from the EP model? It
is very unique in terms of, number one, the labor force that we need is higher. We use almost 2 to 1 number of staff per available room, and as a result of that, we had more staff. But also, I think the experience that we have to provide, it has to be great, and we cannot start delivering experiences that when the guest finally comes back, they don't have a good experience. They are our most important ambassadors, so we really have to focus on have a good experience. Like having a good experience in an all-inclusive hotel where you're pre-paying for the services won't give you a lot of chance to maneuver in order to close all the restaurants or most of the restaurants or close all the bars or close the activities. People are pre-paying for those experiences. So unlike in an EP hotel, when you can survive even by closing all of the restaurants if you want to, because people have options, in the all-inclusive, all the guests expect that all the restaurants are open, the entertainment is there, the bars are there. Yes, doing it in a safety manner with all the new protocols, but that they have all the options and they have to be there. So yes, it is a lot more costly. Also a break-even point. The break-even point we have in the all-inclusive hotels is significantly higher than an EP hotel in order to keep the hotel running.
So Alex, every time we've talked in the past, whether it be on stage or in an interview, airlift has always been one of the topics that we've talk all day about, but clearly that's going to be a challenge coming out of this pandemic. You're able to bring your guests in through your own company. How will airlift change after the pandemic? How will it change to these regions?
Well, airlift is already changing worldwide. I mean, we have to think about finding ourselves in an environment, at least for the next year, if no more, that is going to be at most half of the size that it was only a few months ago. So you're having half of the size of universe of customers with the same amount of supply, or almost the same amount of supply, if lower in some cases, greater in some other cases, and competing for the same type of customer. So of course, connectivity is going to be significantly reduced. It's going to have to come back. We have yet to see what the pricing is going to be like, because although the consumer is financially hurt, it's all supply and demand. And when the supply is significantly reduced, in the case of the airlines, the pricing could go up as well. There's going to be some consolidation. Some of the low-cost carriers are going to go out of business. So we have to see how will that affect us. But clearly, the airlines are going to come back with the seats where the routes are more profitable. So we have to stay competitive. And I think, unfortunately, that some of the rate increase that we're going to see in the hotels are going to be, on the airlift, could be compensated, or most likely it's going to be compensated somehow on the hotel rates. I do think that the occupancy is going to suffer in the hotels, and it's going to take some time to recover. But I think the rates is going to take even longer, because number one, rates by default takes longer to recuperate, but also because we're competing in the worldwide environment, and it's really going to take a long time for the supply to be absorbed by the demand. And until that happens, unfortunately, the rates and the margins are not going to be there. It's going to take a long time to recover. Connectivity is absolutely key, and I think we're going to have to work together with the airlines and with the local governments to try to put together the private sector, including all of the tourism players, as well, of course, airports, airlines, and governments, in order to start opening pairs of cities to bring the connectivity back. Without the connectivity, we're really going to struggle.
Okay, Alex, final question, about 30 seconds for this. What one word would you use to describe how you see the rest of 2020 unfolding, and why would you use that word? 30 seconds.
Well, the one word would be hope, because I think we're going to be better human beings and more sensitive to lived experiences, buying experiences rather than goods. But my biggest concern right now is the polarization and the protectionism that we see in the world. If we're seeing a lot more nationalism, people trying to protect, more looking to inbound to protect. And I think the lack of connection, interconnection with all the rest of the countries, and openness and working together, that's my biggest concern.
Alex, it's been a pleasure catching up with you today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, and best wishes to you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's move on to, next up is David Kong. David has led Best Western since 2004, making him the longest running CEO of the major hotel chains. Under David's watch, the membership organization has grown to a global portfolio of 18 brands, comprising almost 4,700 hotels. David, welcome. How are you today?
Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you having me. I'm doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Well, let's kick it off with the question. What's on the top of your mind today?
Well, today I was just reading the reports on our hotels opening and performance, and it's really encouraging to see that more and more of our hotels are reopening worldwide. As you know, about half of our portfolio is outside of the United States, and most of those hotels were closed during the pandemic. So it's encouraging to see some of them reopening. Although some countries are still being ultra conservative, for example, in Europe, UK, the hotels in UK are not allowed to be open yet. And in Asia, notably Thailand and Philippines and Malaysia are still very restrictive. But aside from these governments allowing the hotels to open, the hotels in these countries also face an uphill battle. And just as an example, South Korea arguably has done the best job in managing the pandemic, but they are highly dependent on international business. So although locations like the Jeju Island has done reasonably well, the business in Seoul is greatly compromised. and many of the hotels in Seoul are still not open yet. And it's difficult to attract that international business with all the travel restrictions and quarantine requirements. What I've seen based on the report this morning is just like in the US, the early recovery is very much leisure driven. Outdoor locations, beaches, parks, and the like. The urban locations, the city center hotels in major cities are much more challenged. And I think we can all come to a summation that, you know, when the offices are still closed and there are no visitors to these offices, the business segment is challenged. And on top of it, you've got meetings and conventions that are still being very challenged. What's encouraging for me to see is also that the country that led us into this pandemic, China, actually smog is returning to many of the cities, which is in some ways an encouraging sign because that means factories are reopening and traffic is becoming hectic again and hotels are now inching up to 50% occupancy. So that's an encouraging sign to see.
You talked about your existing hotels. What about expansion right now? What development or conversion opportunities, particularly in the Caribbean and Latin America regions? I know that was going to be a focus of yours prior to the pandemic. How is that all shaping up now?
Yeah, the Caribbean has always been of great interest to us, and in the last year we made a concerted effort to enter that market. And last year, with the acquisition of World Hotels and the previous couple of years ago, we launched the short stay brands. That set us up to offer 18 different brands in all kinds of chain scale segments, from premium economy all the way up to luxury. And if you think about our brands, we have traditional hotels, extended stay or suite type properties. We have boutique or lifestyle hotels. We have soft brands in every chain scale segment. So that really allows us to offer many different options to developers and capitalize on many different kinds of opportunities out there.
How would you describe the process then of adding properties to your portfolio? Is it stalled right now? Are you moving forward with it? What's the development pipeline look like?
Well, the development pipeline, meaning the applications that are already approved, and the hotels, the applicants are in different stages of onboarding. That's intact. You know, all these developers are proceeding. So I'm very heartened to hear that. The development efforts is a bit compromised right now because there's so much uncertainty. And in some locations, there are still travel restrictions. So it's a bit compromised right now. But, you know, I'm very optimistic because aside from all the brands that we offer, you also know that we have very powerful loyalty programs, distribution systems, tremendous sales and marketing reputation out there. So we have so much going on for our brands that I feel really optimistic.
You mentioned distribution and loyalty. Those are obviously very important when it comes to the consumer-facing aspect of things. What role will those two topics in particular play in the industry's recovery? Well,
huge roles, because in the beginning, as we're going through now, the business is still very soft. So you've got to fish where the fish is swimming, and you also want to target people that already show an affinity towards you. The loyalty program, our loyalty program has a database of 40-some million members, and previous to the pandemic, it was driving 50% of our business. So it's a very, very powerful program, and we can use a promotional platform that exists in the loyalty program and entice people to come and stay with us as the need to travel arises.
You mentioned the 18 brands that you have. I know we've talked about this before. I remember when you had one brand and just tiering things. And how important is a multi-branded portfolio in this day and age? Is that what's going to drive a recovery for most of the hotel companies, having multiple brands?
Well, having multiple brands provide options. And so you're not missing out on any opportunities. You can basically offer an option for every chain scale segment and for every type of hotels. And the soft brands in particular, having soft brands in all these different chain scale segments is particularly important because I noticed that many of the interest expressed in the Caribbean market is for soft brands. So having that is, especially well hotel soft brands, that's really advantageous for us.
And do those brands, do they, I guess the question is, do they fit everywhere in the world, or do you, like for Caribbean and Latin America, are there specific brands within your portfolio that you would be targeting for those regions for expansion?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Obviously, we want to customize the product based on the locale. And for that reason, you think about our boutique brands, we have 5 and Glow that are prototypical construction, new construction type of product, but then we also have Aiden and Stady that really empowers the developers and owners to capitalize on the local experience and offer something that's unique in the locale. So that's what I mean by different options. Even for boutique and lifestyle brands, we have different options.
Okay. As we close out this, as we said, they move fast, these 8-minute segments. Let me ask you the final question. What one word would you use to describe how you see the rest of 2020 unfolding and why?
Well, great minds think alike. Alex actually used the word that I wanted to use, hope. But
it's okay, we could use it.
Let me use the word faith. The hotel industry has been through a lot of crises, and we've always stuck together and we work together and we lean on one another to find strength and resilience. We've always prevailed. Let's have faith in our industry and in the future.
All right, very good. David Kong, thank you so much for joining us. Best wishes to you and the entire BWH Hotels family. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate being on your panel.
Okay, well, thanks. We'll catch you down the road. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So moving along nicely today, we have Isabel Caires. Isabel is from, I'm going to make sure I get this right. It's CIBC FirstCaribbean International Bank. She's been there for 10 years. She's responsible for the origination, structuring, and execution of financing mandates, both corporate and sovereign clients throughout the region and around the world. Oh, there. Oh, so Isabel, welcome. How are you today?
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thanks to you and the group for having me.
And you're calling in from beautiful Barbados today. So tell me what's on your mind, at the top of your mind, as you're sitting in paradise.
Sure. So top of our mind, as always, are our clients and supporting them during these unprecedented times. And so we're doing those in many ways, providing liquidity support through the provision of principal and interest moratoriums. We've also been providing working capital lines, access to otherwise restricted funds, and covenant waivers such that our clients can really focus on their recovery efforts. But we're doing that across our portfolio, so both on the corporate investment banking, retail, business banking, and wealth. And so really, as we look at that in the context then of recovery, and the region itself is somewhat not entirely unique, but what I think is a little bit different than, say, the rest of the world is just how reliant we are on tourism. And so with the immediacy of our governments having to close borders almost entirely, or in some instances entirely, the benefit of that is that we have seen our case numbers be significantly lower than the global averages. So that has really allowed, I think, a lot of the preservation of the safety of the citizens of the region, and now has allowed the governments to really be focused on recovery efforts and what that looks like, where you have countries that are in some instances reliant up to 60-70%, both indirectly and even more directly from tourism. And so as we look at those recovery efforts, and the protocols that are being put in place with the governments in conjunction with the private and public sector, we're hopeful that we'll see more resurgence in consumer demand. And we are seeing some encouraging signs out of those countries that have reopened and that have announced reopening dates, both in terms of forward bookings. And then obviously still conscious of what's happening globally and the impact as it will have to our region.
I don't think there's a hotel owner probably in the world that hasn't been affected by this pandemic in some way, shape, or form. Some are obviously hurting a lot worse than others, and a lot of it boils down to the financing vehicles that they have in place. So how do you see workouts or I guess workouts as the Caribbean starts to come down from the peak and start reopening? How do you see workouts? Are they going to be a big part of the landscape for the foreseeable future?
Well, I don't know that we're quite there yet. I think that, there has been a lot of positive to the industry and successive kind of increases in RevPAR. And a lot of the strength of the industry has meant that a number of hoteliers have been well positioned to enter into this time. And particularly those that have relatively low leverage and therefore have significant capacity to take on incremental debt to provide working capital support, or whose equity comes in the form where they are able to provide additional support. I think that's easier in the interim, but at the same time, I think that there has been a lot of collaboration, a lot of connectivity amongst the industry in trying to find ways to manage itself during these times, and trying to look at their expenses and really keep a very tight ship. And so even though I think that unfortunately we will start to see some workouts happen in the future, I don't know that we're quite there yet. And I do think that it will largely be predicated on what happens in the next kind of 6 to 18 months as islands start to reopen and consumer demand starts to return.
Are there any words of advice you have for an owner right now that might be struggling, on the financial side of things, and in particular with their mortgage or their financing? Anything you could recommend that they do right now that as a piece of advice?
I think talk to your lenders and let's have very open and frank discussions around what we think is going to be required. And a lot of that's going to be planning and unfortunately, just given the relative uncertainty, looking at options A, B, and perhaps C. But I think that there has been a lot of support that is generally available in the lending community in the region, and that's supported in part by the regulators. And I think that we at least have seen a lot of collaboration across the private sector and the governments in terms of providing that support, because it's in everyone's interest, I think, that we keep a lot of these great names around during these times.
Yeah, that's a really good point in terms of the iconic nature of some of the properties throughout the Caribbean and the importance of consumer recognition for that. I mean, from a lender's perspective, that has to be a key element into the marketing for not just consumers but potential new owners that come into the region. Is that fair to say?
I think that's right. And, it's interesting when you talk about new owners into the region. I think we have also we still get interest and we still are getting calls during this time from potential investors who are looking. So it really, I think, does show the strength of the region, that the demand still exists for potential opportunities, even with what's happening around us and in such an uncertain environment.
How would you characterize hotel valuations during this point in time and going forward? That's obviously been affected by the business or lack of business. How do you look at it as a lender when you come to valuations or when you start thinking about valuations in the future?
Well, I think that it's a great question, and it's a question we spend a lot of time talking about. And I think right now I think we can all say values are going to be down, and the degree that they're going to be down, I think, varies. A lot of the discussions we're having are in and around the 25 to 30% range. But until some more assets start to trade, and there have been some, but until more start to, I think it'll be harder to get a real reflection of what the true values are. And the value today and again, 6 months, 12 months down the line are expected to be different, just given or what is going to change in the coming months. But, you know, as a lender, I think we are trying to take a fairly pragmatic approach in thinking about values, you know, coming into COVID. And also in looking at the clients or potential clients and their response to it. And of course, working, you know, very closely with the appraisers in determining what we think is going to be a reasonable recovery period into the future.
It's all going to depend on that mighty bid-ask spread, right? That's going to determine a lot. Okay, well, to kind of close, same question that I've asked the other two speakers so far. What word would you use to describe how you see the rest of 2020 unfolding and why?
Well, unfortunately, was going to say hope as well, which really does show what we're all thinking. But in lieu of that, I'll just say resilience. And I really do think that the Caribbean as a whole and as a people, we are very resilient. There has been tremendous collaboration, I think, as I mentioned before, across the public and private sector. And I have to believe that if you're going to be socially distancing, then better to do that on a beautiful beach in Barbados, Jamaica, or elsewhere in the region. And so with that, I'll close with resiliency.
Well, if being on that beautiful beach in Barbados or Jamaica is being resilient, I want to be resilient, okay? Isabel, thank you for all of your support. Thank you for being here today. We greatly appreciate it, and best wishes until we see each other again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. Okay,
thank you. Okay, here we go. We're continuing now. We're at about the halfway point. So far, so good. We've heard a lot of great insight from what's going on in the industry. So next up is John McCarthy. John is from Leisure Partners and is one of the chairs of the HOLA conference. He's going to join us from another sunny locale in Acapulco today. He was head of Mexico's National Trust Fund for Tourism Development and Promotion from 2000 to 2006 under President Vicente Fox. Prior to that, he led Raintree Resorts International and the tourism division of Bancomer, Mexico's largest bank. He co-founded Leisure Partners about a year ago. So here we go. John, are you there?
I am.
Ah, welcome, John. There you are. Nice to see your smiling face as usual. How are you?
Very well, thanks. And thanks for having me. Greetings to everybody from Acapulco, Mexico, of all places. What's on the top of my mind right now, Jeff, is I guess your first question here, as you have moderated today. And I think the first part is, as Alex Zozaya was saying, is how devastating this has been to the world in general, but tourism specifically has been terrible. And in the case of Mexico, the tourism industry, which we must remember, is much more than just hotels. You have the restaurants, you have the hotels, you have the timeshare companies, you have the real estate side of it, you have the small operator who leases equipment somewhere, and it has been absolutely devastating in Mexico. The labor force is normally around 4 million people. The estimations by Mexico's Consejo Nacional Empresarial Turístico, which is sort of Mexico's tourism roundtable, believes that a quarter of the labor force, that's out of 4 million, 1 million is out of a job right now, and we have no social security to cover them as such. The large companies have made big efforts to keep or pay half a salary in many cases to keep people with a way of life, but it has been terribly complicated. Keep in mind that 90% of business in tourism is companies that are smaller than 10 employees. And what is really important here is for our government to understand that we have, over the last 40 or 50 years in Mexico, we have gone from pretty much nothing to a powerhouse of tourism. Mexico is the number 7 country in receipts of tourism. And if we want that to stay on, we must take action to stay there and to recover quickly, which I think we will. I think there will be tough choices for lenders, developers, and management companies in the near term. Also, I think mobility is a key issue. If we don't resolve mobility, it doesn't matter what you do with the hotels. If people can't get on an airplane and fly to Cancun, or are not willing to get on an airplane and fly to Los Cabos, we have an issue, because no matter what you do with that hotel, people won't be arriving there. On the more positive side, I think a word has come out here, which is resilience, and the industry as such has always been resilient. It always comes back. It came back from the H1N1 crisis in 2009. We came back from the 9/11 crisis, and strongly so. We've come back from very hard hurricanes, and we will come back from this, but the thing is, when?
So, John, what's the current landscape estimate? Are most of the hotels in Mexico closed right now? Any estimate of that number?
For all practical effects, everything is shut down. Every hotel in the country. I think there's small allowances in some of the cities because you have industry that requires hotels, but in general terms, pretty much the whole industry is shut down everywhere, and pretty much no exceptions. And what makes it more complicated is we still don't really have any signs of when this is going to really finish.
So when you're talking specifically about the hotel industry and hotel owners and investors who maybe clearly are most likely struggling financially, what advice do you give them? You have a lot of clients, private equity, real estate owners, investors, developers, lenders. What advice do you provide at this stage? Is it a matter of just hanging in there?
Well, I think if you look at what's happened in the past and what happened, for instance, in the real estate crisis of 2007, 2008, is we need the banks and we need the developers to be smart, to be flexible. In one of your conferences, the words extend and pretend came out again. And I think the banks right now will have to extend and pretend, but we still don't really know what kind of projections you can make. So it's difficult to define sort of what's going to happen next year. But I do believe that, say that 2 years from now, this will be pretty much back to what it was 6 months ago. I think the new abnormal is going to be very similar to what was happening 6 months ago. I think a vaccine will be produced that will give certainty to the industry. I think people will learn to live this new environment, because after all, it is human nature. It's part of a way of life is to travel. We are social animals. We move around, and we will move around once we figure it out. I think you'll find that things will change in terms of, for instance, what is a spa in a hotel or a gym will probably be used less, but you'll see a lot of open air activities. You'll see golf probably bouncing back, which was going down the hill a bit. You'll see biking and hiking, a lot of outdoor activities. And people have to be really smart in terms of what the product they're going to offer to the new tourist is going to be.
And that's the key, isn't it, for hotel owners and operators right now, is trying to figure out what consumers will be embracing when the recovery actually hits full stride. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, and I want to make a point here, is Mexico has, after the US, it's the country that sells most timeshares in the world. And destinations such as Cancun, Cabo, and Puerto Vallarta, probably about 50% of the supply are timeshare owners. And you probably have a mix of of Mexicans, 50%, and non-Mexicans would be the rest. And they have always proven to be the ones that come back first. I've seen people after Hurricane Wilma back in the hotel 3 days after the hurricane, well, back in their resort. But what they will expect, I think, is the key. And I think we have to have capacity to react. We have to be creative. We have to be smart. We have to go away from standardization, and we have to go into the new way of doing things, but with enormous creativity. We have to be really smart.
It's all about experience, isn't it? That won't change, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay, so the final question of this segment then is the same one that I've asked the others, and I hope you have a different word.
I have actually 2 words.
You have 2 words. Okay, let's hear them.
Well, one is creativity and capacity to react. And I think the banks have to be creative. The developers have to be creative. The restaurant owner has to be creative. And you might invent something right now that isn't working. You have to have the capacity to come up with something new and something different immediately. You need to learn to react and to adapt to the changing situation, and not necessarily what the guy next door is doing is something that might work for you, whether you're a hotelier, a restaurateur, or a tour operator. So I think we have to have a very open mind and an enormous capacity to react to the new situation.
Very good. John McCarthy from Leisure Partners, thank you for your time. Looking forward to seeing you in September at HOLA at the Hard Rock Casino, Hotel and Casino in Florida. Thank you for being with us.
As always, it'll be a pleasure to be there.
Thank you, John. Okay, so on to the next thoughts from oops, I moved one paper too fast. Raul Calvet. Raul focuses on Nicaragua and Central America with his company Calvet and Associates. He is one of the chairs of HOLA conference as well. He founded his company in 1999, and the portfolio has more than 260 investment projects in Central America, including 76 hotels. Raul, hello, are you there today?
Hey, how are you?
Great, how are you doing? How's everything?
Fine.
Great, great, great. So let's start with the question of the day. What's on the top of your mind today, Raul?
Well, we have learned many things during these COVID times. How much of this will remain with us forever and how much will fade, like many important issues have done, I don't know. Our civilization has so many history lessons not learned and so much history that repeated itself that I still have some doubts about the consistency of the new normal. Maybe the new normal will stay with us until the vaccine is distributed, or to the extent of the future legal enforcement from regulations or from franchise, insurance, liability coverage requirements, or most probably to the extent of competitive marketing practices. In any event, the pandemic will end at some time and our society will emerge with positive lessons learned. In this context, what amazes me the most is to realize how much globally interdependent we have grown as professionals and as an industry. Every little community and small town in our countries now know where Wuhan is in China. But airlift, commerce, business, visiting friends and family, and education travel were the special vehicles that carry the virus. So literally we have the world in the palm of our hands, and we've never been so connected and aware of good things and bad things. But incredibly as it sounds, in our daily business operations, we still see hotels and tourism organizations returning to the small village, looking for market intel in our own industry indicators, or starting from the foreign arrivals to their countries, or from the results of domestic travel. And as weak as we all consider these projections to be, these are still the normal for thousands of small and medium-sized independent hotels. But I believe that the pandemic will help our industry to implement new practices and new technologies. I'm enthusiastic to learn more every day about advancements in machine learning, in human behavioral studies, in neuroscience, so we can understand which are the reasons that will make our markets decide to travel or to push forward other unrelated economic sectors to travel to our destinations. I have been following blockchain experts talking about banking and finance, implementing new technology and promoting startups that provide tools to improve business and discover better intel. We in our industry are surrounded by these innovations. Food tech, applied to food and beverage, nutrition management and procurement. Fintech, applied to financial analysis of hotel performance. Blockchain and algorithm-based search for better decisions. New human resources management based on behavioral technology. New marketing analytics down to the individual customer level. Value graphic segmentations, forget about age groups, forget about traditional market segments. And us in the real estate and development industry of hotels, we are finally catching up with new tools provided by PropTech and context systems. But of course, all this hype and disruptive development is contingent to the same old virtues of the good old business practices like strategic planning, keeping records and collecting data, incorporating well-educated and well-paid employees. In Central America, and depending on the country, we hope to be back in business during July and September this year, but with a lot of limitations, and probably in full capacity in 2021. But how will demand respond is the key element that should not just be hoped for, but analyzed and forecasted in depth with new technologies and with global information.
It's interesting that you're talking about machine learning, AI, things of that nature. In terms of how you measure that going forward, that's going to be a primary thing. Are hotels ready to accept that technology coming out of the recovery, do you think?
Branded hotels, of course, they are already going into new technologies. And the blockchain is being used already in many accounting and data information systems. My worries are for the small and medium-sized hotels. As you know, they are the majority of the hotels in the world. In the case of Central America, we have about 12,000 hotels, of which only 1.5% are branded hotels, less than 200. So we have a huge majority that will really have to make an effort in order to improve their technology.
What is the one question you're getting most often from your clients as they kind of come to grips with this recovery, from a hotel ownership investment perspective?
It's the same question all the time. When and how is the market demand going to respond in the near and midterm future? It is easy to forecast how the industry is going to prepare and to compete, but that is only the supply element of the equation. The defining element is always demand and its economic capacity.
Your background includes, I think, 14 years at Paraguayan Airlines, so you have a good feel for airlift. How do you see that evolving for Central America, and how will that affect hotels as the recovery takes shape?
It is critical because the integration of Central America still is a hope. A few sectors of the countries have been integrated like customs, but you still cannot take a car in Guatemala and drive and return your rented car in Costa Rica, or you cannot still hop through Central America with add-ons or small fares. It sometimes is as expensive to go from Managua to Tegucigalpa than it is from Managua to Madrid. And most of those rates, it's not only on the airline side, the responsibility is also most of the time on the governments, that they place such a huge tax and some other levies in each rate that sometimes amount to 100% increase on the transportation cost. So it is very important that this situation is resolved in order to really allow movement through free movement through Central America.
Kind of closing out then, Raul, what's the one word you would choose to describe how the rest of 2020 unfolds, and why would you use that word?
I'll go with John. 2 words: cautiously optimistic. And there's 5 reasons for that. Because we still have to feel the full economic experience of the impact of the pandemic. We have to measure the reduction of demand, and above all, the reduction in the capacity in all the markets except the luxury. Not only in our region, but also especially in the United States, which is our main market. Second, most hotels are going to survive the quarantine and the 0 operations right now. But I'm worried to see which will survive the ramp-up period of the next 6 months or maybe a year until RevPAR stabilization. We have to still see how the domestic travel is going to regain their capacity, and we still have to see what will be the future reaction of lenders and the appetite for loans for reopenings, rebrandings, or adaptations.
Okay. Well, very good, Raul. Thank you so much for being part of it. Excellent insight as always. And again, same with John, I hope to see you, let me rephrase it. I plan to see you in September in Florida for the HOLA conference. Thank you.
I'll see you in September.
All right, that's a deal. Thank you. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Okay, so we're in the final stretch here. Last but not least, the next speaker gets the Patient Award for today. Ricardo Mader. Ricardo is one of HOLA's co-chairs and has been with JLL since 2008. He's based in Brazil and focuses his work throughout Latin America. His specialties include investment sales, market research and analysis, development of marketing strategies, marketing plans, hotel company selection and contract negotiation, and asset manager. Okay, Ricardo, hello. Are you with us today?
Fine, and you? Thank you for having me here.
Well, thank you for being here. We greatly appreciate it. And of course, thank you for your patience. You are batting cleanup, as we say.
Yeah. It's always a pleasure to listen to my friends, my amigos, John and Raul.
That's right. That's right. Everyone's full of great insight this afternoon. So let's start with the same question. What's on the top of your mind today, Ricardo?
Well, like Isabel, what's on top of my mind is my clients, of course. As you said, we asset manage many hotels. So South America in general, and Brazil in particular, it's very used to crisis. Brazil is just coming out of the worst economic crisis of our history. And just as when we are starting to improve the performance of the hotels, came this crisis that we never saw like this before. About 80% of the urban hotels in the country are closed. The ones that are open are not making money. It's just that it was made more sense to stay open than closed, but it's still losing money. And 100% of the resorts, like in Mexico, are closed. So our work is to preserve cash, preserve the working capital of the hotels, to preserve the life of the hotel, and ultimately the jobs that are behind this great industry. So that's where we are focused, and we had the first moment where we had to do everything possible to preserve cash, reduce all the costs, renegotiate all the contracts, use all of the legislation available and that was implemented for this crisis to minimize the cost of the labor without firing people, trying to preserve the jobs, and negotiating with the hotel companies that, let me say here, that they've been incredible partners in this situation. They are being very creative, very, very proactive in implementing all the cost reductions. And as an asset manager, we work with many hotel companies, with many kind of hotels. So we are really benchmarking a lot of what's being done in the industry and bringing to our clients. So that was the first moment, and now South America in general, it's 45 days behind US in the cycle of the pandemic. So we are just now releasing a little bit the isolation implementation that was made. And so we are now just thinking about some hotels reopening. So we are focusing now how to reopen, how not to make the mistakes of overburdening the hotel with costs. I think that was Alex and Dave that said that it's basically a pre-opening of the hotel, investing again in training people, in training your staff, and digging for new clients. And so it's going to be a huge cost to reopen the hotel. So we have to be very cautious with to estimate how is the demand going to react, and incrementing the costs accordingly with the demand. So basically preserving the hotels and the jobs. This is the top of our mind today.
Okay, so as an asset manager, you sit between the owner and the manager, the brand,
Yeah.
or third-party management. As you're starting to look ahead to reopening, is that relationship pretty good between the owner and the manager? Are you finding there to be a lot of agreement on things, or is it a little bit more a tougher conversation?
No, as I said, I mean, I without exception, all the hotel brands and operators have been very cooperative, very proactive, and they are very sensible to the situation, and they are being very helpful and being partners in this situation. So far we found then somebody to rely with ideas to be creative. Of course, they are working with what I think is going to be very important is creating the new, hygiene and procedures and new service way of servicing the clients. So this is, very, very well done in partnership with great health institutions. So this is being very, very helpful to work and in four hands. And we also have hotels that are leased by hotel companies. So in this case, the hotel companies are also suffering because they have to burden with the working capital. So we are helping then also the many hotel operators in this situation.
Of course, you work for JLL, which
Mm-hmm.
global real estate company, and what's your take on the transactions situation in South America? How do you see it taking shape in Latin America as the pandemic kind of moving away?
Well, we do have some transactions that we're on due diligence phase, and they didn't stop. So even with this last 90 days, they're still on. So the investors are still interested, and sellers also. South America in general, with the exception of Chile and in Latin America, Mexico, we don't have debt available for financing hotels. So owners they are not leveraged. So there was never a pressure to sell the hotel. So finding the correct value of the hotels was always a problem. So now with the cash pressure that many hotels and even the disillusion with the industry a little bit of some hotels owned by families, I believe that there'll be many opportunities under this situation, that the price will come to the correct target for investors and being more reasonable. So there might be a chance of actually we see an increase of number of transactions in the region.
Okay, very good, Ricardo. So you get the privilege of having the last word of the day. What one word would you use to describe how you see the rest of 2020 unfolding and why? And we have about 30 seconds.
Sure, I definitely thought about faith also, faith that we will find the vaccine and we will come out of this. But I chose another word that is union. I think that our industry has to be united now. The airline, the travel agents, the hotels, the hotel owners, the hotel companies. The only way for us to survive the next 6 months is to be united, is to go to the governments. Here in Brazil, for example, they're talking about helping government help to the airlines, but not to the hotel industry. So the hotels and have to understand the importance of the airlines have to understand the importance of the hotels. So we have to be together and find ways to help the entire industry, the travel and tourism industry.
That's a great word to summarize, Ricardo, as the entire industry, travel-wise, needs to come together to beat this. So thank you so much, and like
pleasure.
Too, I look forward to seeing you in Florida in September.
It will be a pleasure. The 10th edition of the conference.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Ricardo. Have a good day. Best wishes to you. Okay, so we're going to close out here. I'm going to share a screen here real quick again, and we're going to start the slideshow from this slide right here. Just a quick reminder that we have CHRIS and HOLA September 8th, 9th, and 9th through 11th at Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Florida. And the last word will be our next 6x8 recovery top of mind session will be on Wednesday, June 17th. That's next Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. It'll be ALIS focused. You can see the lineup here. Keith Barr from IHG, Monty Bennett from Ashford, Amanda Height from STR, Hilda Perez Alvarado from JLL, Cecil Stanton from AHOA, and Greg Friedman from Peachtree Hotel Group. So we'll give you a wide variety of viewpoints there as well. Thank you for joining us for this edition. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you next week. Be well, everyone. Thank you.